Welcome to Military Faith and Spiritual Resilience. This is Elizabeth Fulgaro. With me is Erin Nichols, nutritional and fitness coach and Gold Star wife. Thank you for continuing your story with us, Erin.
Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. You have so much to share. Really appreciate you being here. So when we finished the last episode, you had realized that in order to be present to Sam and just really be together in the way that worked and be present to him, you couldn't really continue your work in speech at school. But you still have to be Erin, in addition to being Sam's wife. So where did God lead you from there?
So I'd started listening to podcasts for, I got into it probably around the same time as he had been in the hospital. And there was this one I was listening to, it was a Primal Blueprint. And Primal is kind of like under the umbrella of ancestral health, so like very similar to paleo. And I have a friend who was actually working for the company Primal Blueprint, and just through my own, as I'm still doing endurance sports and everything like that, and I kind of have some crummy genes, and so just really injury prone. I had some like health related stuff going on, and so I was doing a lot of just kind of manipulation of my own nutrition and to help my health. And so I had kind of made changes that had made significant improvements in my own health. And then I started hearing on the Primal Blueprint podcast, I started hearing about the Primal Health Coach Academy. Primal Health Coach Institute. And, probably a couple months of me like hearing this thing. And it's probably been like a year at that point since I stopped working. And I was kind of at that point again where I was when I decided to go back to school, where like, okay, that was a nice break, but my brain needs something else to do, and I need something else to do besides hang out with Sam. As lovely as that is, I had time in the morning, I had time in the late afternoon, evening. I had a lot of time on my hands. And I need to be doing something more productive and more like impactful, contributing, to somebody else. And so I signed up and started. It was like a self-paced kind of thing, videos, audio, text, all that kind of thing. Got my certification, and what was really great is because it was already the lifestyle that I was leading, and then I was learning the science behind it. Learn a little bit about specifically on the coaching end of things, not just the science of it, but then how do you actually like apply this to humans? And that was just kind of the start of it. And I didn't know anything about building a business. That's the thing, is I got my certification. It's like, all right, sweet. I'm just going to announce it. Tell people, hey, I'm a health coach now. You're fat. You're sick. Hire me. It doesn't exactly work that way, unfortunately. And first of all, I'd never call anybody fat. But
no, actually, you have a different way of talking about health that doesn't go there.
Yeah, I typically don't. Yeah, but that's like when someone is feeling the pain point of being overweight, that's what's going on in their head. So apparently it doesn't work that way. You can't just kind of like put your open sign out and people just come to you. I wasn't selling pizza. I was selling intentional eating and movement and good quality sleep and hydration, So, there still are growing pains. I'm definitely I'm way further along than I was way back then. But I was just trying to figure out, like, I don't even know. It was kind of like the beginning of my Christian journey in a similar way of like, I don't know what I don't know. And so it was like, let me buy this course, and hire this person, and just try to learn anything I can. At the very least, all right, get my LLC, like get that established. And then eventually I did end up hiring a business coach, and who was able to kind of give me specific action steps, like do this, now do this. which helped. And that was after you and I worked together too. So I was
Yeah.
still a major noob when
Yeah.
you and I worked
I
together.
had the privilege of being one of your clients,
Yes.
which was as a health coach, which was
Yeah.
just absolutely super. So you're building a business as a health coach, right? And that allows you to pull together the nutrition and the fitness and all of it together. What's going on with Sam?
On the one hand, kind of cognitively, physically, we're still seeing improvements amazingly after, like 13 years. And, that just he was fun to be around and, great hugger, great cuddler, all that. But he was getting sick a lot. The last year of his life, over about like a 12, from like April to April, 12-month span, I think he was in the hospital every calendar month except for one.
Wow.
And he kept getting sepsis. And this was we were used to him getting pneumonia and getting UTIs. But what kept happening is they were finding finding bacteria in his blood that wasn't showing up anywhere else in his body. So typically what would happen is if they found bacteria in his blood, he usually had some sort of long-term IV because he often needed IV antibiotics. And he was such a hard stick that we would leave in these long-term central lines. And he had these like tunneled central lines that could potentially be there for months. So that's always the first place that we look is pull the line, culture the line, but the lines kept coming back negative. And so there was this bacteria in his blood that was causing this major infection, and this bacteria wasn't anywhere else in his body. And there would often be other things going on too. But that was this main thing, and it was this big mystery. And so he would end up on these really powerful IV antibiotics. He would be discharged on IV antibiotics. He would come off. He would be okay for 2 to 3 weeks, and that would happen again. And, got very, very, we had already been in and out of our local hospital for the previous 12 years, 13 years, or I guess like 10 or 11 years. So we were already very well known. And then we even more so became very well known. I could not walk from one spot in the hospital to the next without seeing a staff member who knew me by name, ask about Sam, whatever. Nurses would buy me lunch or something like that. We had a nurse, actually his name was Erin, and I was reading to Sam all the time, and he would ask questions about the things that he liked, and told him that Sam loved zombies. Like he was a big zombie movie lover before The Walking Dead, before zombies became like cool again. And so it was on his day off, he went to Barnes and Noble, bought a copy of his favorite book, which was like a zombie book, and brought it in for Sam.
So you could read it to him.
Yeah. So that was what that last year was. And it was a lot of reading, a lot of just hanging out in the hospital when we were at the hospital, or otherwise hanging out at his rehab home and making the best out of that as we could. And we actually started writing a memoir together.
You did?
Yeah. So especially because we had all this time in the hospital, I would, on those days that he was having a better verbal day, I would try to take advantage of that and ask him about his perspective on a particular topic.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah. So I need to get in. Talking about all this makes me want to get back to writing and getting back to it. And I think it'll be really cathartic too when I do. But yeah, so it's like priceless now that I have these words from him.
So I'll be praying for that memoir, right? You know that I will.
Thank
So,
you.
okay. So you've mentioned several times his last year.
Yeah.
What happened?
So after all of these IV antibiotics, just over and over and over again, he was also on a like a therapeutic dose of amoxicillin. So even when he had no symptoms at all, we had this plan for like 6 months straight of just amoxicillin, just to try to keep something fighting, basically, because he had no immune system. And that was the problem. So the shutdown was, first week of March or whatever.
So talking about COVID?
Yeah. So
2020.
2020, March, whenever the shutdown happened, he had been out of the hospital for probably maybe 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks at that point. And then the shutdown happened, and I couldn't go see him.
At Care Meridian.
Right. His amazing therapist, however, would FaceTime. So during his therapy, we would FaceTime, and we would basically use his talking to me as part of his speech therapy.
Cool.
And particularly like projecting his voice was a big thing. And so if he like wasn't thinking about it and it was more of a natural thing, like if you were on the other side of the room, it's probably more likely that he's going to talk loud enough for you to hear than if you're right in front of him.
Okay, so he recognized that.
Oh, he didn't. It's not even a recognized thing. It's just an automatic. It's just an automatic thing.
Got it.
And that's what the difference was. Is it's automatic.
Yeah.
And so it was actually a really good thing to do as far as therapy goes. Being on FaceTime and all that. And so that was how we got to see each other, basically. So the last time I spoke to him, I had gone out for a bike ride in the afternoon, and I was only like a mile away from my house, and my phone rang, and or I got a text, I think, and his speech therapist asked, "Is now a good time to talk?" And I was like, "Yeah, cool." So I pull into this neighborhood, and I'm just sitting there on the sidewalk with my bike laying there on the ground, FaceTiming him. And just, having a good conversation, whatever. I don't know what we talked about, but it was a nice conversation. Talking to his therapist, talking to him and all that. And that was the last time I talked to him. That's the last time I saw him. So the next day, I don't even know what happened that day. Apparently you said we talked to each other that day.
We did. You actually were my health coach. We talked about you becoming my health coach that day. Because I'd seen you were officially starting the business. And so I said, hey, I want to be one of your clients because I think you're awesome. So, no, we did speak that day. But then that evening, his health declined rapidly.
Yeah. So I got the call by the way, phones ringing are not I have like a visceral reaction.
I bet you do.
Especially to certain ringtones.
Yeah.
Because I've woken up in the middle of the night many times. So, yeah, the phone ringing, and it just brings me back to even the first phone call when I was at Dimple Records. Phone call, they sent him to the emergency room. He has a high fever, and his oxygen was low. He was desatting. So I don't know what's going to happen at the hospital because it's COVID, and it was the very beginning of COVID, and like everything was shut down, and all I knew is like you couldn't be with your person in the hospital. So I go there and go up to the emergency room doors, and what I'm used to seeing is an emergency room full of people. Instead, there is a nurse sitting like a little desk with a computer right there as soon as you walk in, fully PPE'd out, and she recognized me, and I tell her what's up. She calls back, and they let me in.
Oh,
which
thank
yes,
you, God.
But also I was like, it must be serious.
Well, yes, oh dear.
So I think it was a combination of how sick he was and that it was us. He couldn't communicate. They needed, all of that. So there are rooms in the emergency room that instead of just having a curtain, it's like a isolation room, and so it's basically like a sliding glass door. So they had me in a chair outside of the room. So I was like in the hallway, but I could see in through the sliding glass door. His temperature was 106.
Oh my.
Yeah. So we had the one of the great blessings of this was that because we had spent so much time in that hospital, we knew everybody there. They knew him. Nurses knew his history. They knew what his lungs looked like. That the doctors he'd just been there like 3 weeks before, and even though his test ended up coming back negative for COVID, the tests were also brand new at this point. His lungs looked like that of a COVID patient's lungs.
Oh my goodness.
So there's a particular pattern, I guess, that it would show, and it was very different from his typical what his lungs typically looked like, and basically, his temperature spiked around 4:30, and his heart stopped a little after 11.
Oh, Erin, I'm so sorry.
It was really fast. So we were in the emergency room. It was probably around like 7 or so. I think like when I got the call or like when we went to the hospital, because they were, they started with Tylenol and at Care Meridian, they started with Tylenol and, like ice packs and cold compresses and the stuff that they would typically do. But instead of his temperature going down, which is how he would typically react to that, it just continued to go up. And so then they decided they had to send him to the hospital. So, basically they're in the hospital. They're in the process of deciding. I think they were going to put him on a vent. I think that was the consideration. Either put him on a vent in the ER, or we take him to the ICU first and then set it up there. And so the nurses and the respiratory therapists are kind of figuring this out, and they decide, okay, he's starting to tank. Let's get him to the ICU right away. So the ICU and the ER are really close to each other, just down the hall, and so they're moving him. He's getting worse as they're just moving him into the ICU. Take me to the ICU waiting room, which I spent a lot of time in before, and within 2 minutes, code blue, ICU B.
Oh my goodness.
And I then see multiple staff members who were just working on him running down the hallway in various directions. And I just had this like ice feeling all over my body. Like, this can't be happening. Within a couple minutes of the code blue, this nurse comes in. But she's not an ICU nurse. She works on the second floor. And I think her name is Jen. I'm going to call her Jen.
Sounds good.
She works on the second floor. She'd had him multiple times. And she just happened to be in the ICU, like, getting something. And she saw that it was Sam that coded. And so she came to find me.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
So she sat there with me. And she was there with me when the nurse came out. And the doctor came out to tell me he was gone. I had called our parents at this point, before. And my mom was on her way. My mom and my sister were on their way. And they had let the emergency room nurse know to let them come in and to bring him straight to the ICU. I didn't see a single other person that wasn't staff either. And so my mom got there first, just a few minutes basically after I found out. And Jen stayed with me.
What a gift.
Yeah. It really was. It was the, I've never felt that way before. Like, it was weird because emotionally, it was like I wasn't feeling it yet.
Right.
So, I mean,
Sure.
I guess what I was feeling was shock. The
Right.
physical sensation of shock, I suppose, is what I was actually feeling. My mom had a much more dramatic emotional reaction, which I would expect because that's just how she is. I had a lot of practice building up those walls, and not feeling my feelings.
Yeah.
So, yeah, basically, that was it. They did let me go see him, but it was COVID. And so, I had to be gowned and gloved. It was a little bit different. They couldn't let anybody else go back to see him, only me. And that was it.
And your life changed again.
Yeah, because even though I was Erin, I was still Sam's wife. And I was still... Care Meridian was still part of my daily life. And the staff there, their family. And not only had we not been, and not been able to see them with the shutdown, it was like, what is my life without going there every day and being with those people? And who am I if I'm not Sam's wife? If I'm not a caregiver? If I'm not a wounded warrior wife? And then realizing I'm a widow. And that just whole new, identity. And so, similar to when initially in Bethesda, when I was grieving kind of the loss of the future that we had dreamed of, my identity is Nichols' wife in the Marine Corps. Now, I was kind of facing a similar thing. And the future that we could have never dreamed of before, which had become our new normal, was now gone. And so even though I knew that this would always come, it was still hard to process.
Can we continue this?
Yeah.